It's nice to be here. I've never been in the Netherlands before. So yeah, you guys seem to be a great community, and I'm excited to talk to you about CSS. How many of you use CSS in your daily work? Okay, cool. And how many of you currently use SCSS or less or another preprocessor? Just a handful. Okay, cool. So for you guys, this might be a little bit of a review, but I'm glad to know that it's new material for a bunch of you. I'm Kathryn Rotondo. I'm a web and mobile developer, originally from Boston, Massachusetts, in the States. I was a Flash developer for a long time, an ActionScript developer. I call myself a recovering Flash developer now and do animation and motion and interactivity on web pages and in mobile apps. But we're not here to talk about me, we're here to talk about SCSS. So what is it? It is the second iteration of a tool called Sass. Sass stands for Syntactically Awesome Style Sheets. Yeah, really technical, right? Let me just flip over to the web so you can see the web page. It's branded with this like 50s nostalgia kind of imagery. And let me get back to the slides. SCSS, like I said, is the next version, so that stands for Sassy CSS. Sassy means with attitude in English, but you probably all know that because your English is great. So it's a superset of CSS3. That means you can take any CSS3 file that you have and turn it into an SCSS file. And the reason that it's a superset is it wants to give you all of the functionality that CSS3 has, and then to build on top of it so that you can do more things. Things that you, as programmers, have probably been super frustrated not to be able to do in CSS up to this point. So the sort of features that it adds include variables, mix-ins, functions, nesting, and inheritance. And we'll go over each of these in turn, but I just wanted to give you a preview of what's to come. Sass is a CSS preprocessor. So what this means is that instead of writing the final style sheets that will go into production with your site, you write another file, a .scss file, and that file gets compiled into regular CSS files. That's an illustration. It's super easy. People ask me sometimes, why would I want to add that extra step? Doesn't that just make my workflow more stupid and annoying? And it's a valid question, but it doesn't, because this step can be automated in pretty much any way that you want to use Sass. You can have your computer check to see if files have changed, or if you're using other tools, they will check for you. So let's get started with a project. We're going to build a super simple website today about something in the Netherlands that I like. Let's see, I think I already have it open. How do you say it? Yeah, really. Sorry, I live in Germany, so my pronunciation is going to be horrible German. Yeah, so I think it's the perfect food. We're going to make a little website about it. This is a poem that Cookie Monster wrote over Twitter once about cookies. It's co-opting a Carlos William poem about plums. This is just to say me have eaten the cookies that were in the cookie jar and which you were probably saving for snack time. Forgive me, they were delicious, so yummy, and nom nom. And then, we have a block quote at the bottom, and these basic elements, the image, H1, H2, a paragraph, and the block quote are what we'll style today. So let me show you the file structure that I have set up. Right now, there is the index.html file, which I have open here in TextMate, and the image. And actually, we need to create a style sheet. Ooh, let's see. New. Styles.css. Let's see if we reload the page. Yeah, good. So we really, right now, we just have a basic index.html page and a style sheet. So in order to turn this into an SCSS project, I need to rename the style sheet. Get over here, and I will just simply rename it. Oh. Yeah, you can see how badly I type. We are really going to change the name. So right now, if we look at the index.html file, again, it reverts back because I haven't told it, the CSS file that it wants isn't there anymore. So I'm going to use a tool to make that appear. Now you can install Sass as a Ruby gem and deal with it at the command line if you like. I actually use a different tool called Hammer for Mac. And I will show you that now. So here's Hammer. And to get started, I'm just going to drag my whole project folder into Hammer. It just built the project. And you can see that or maybe you can't read that, but it's telling me that it has compiled styles.scss into styles.css. And we can actually go take a look at that and see that that exists. Hammer also added a build folder inside of my PF Congress folder. So here are all of our original files, including the SCSS style sheet. And in the build folder, you see the CSS sheet that it got compiled into. And we can open that and take a look at it. It's a little bit, some white space has been pulled out, but basically it's the same. Keynote. Okay, so we are ready to start using SCSS to make our style sheet a better style sheet, or to make our web page a better web page at all. So the first thing we're going to do is use variables. They're called variables in SCSS, which kind of irks me a little bit because after you define them, you can't change them. So to me, that's a constant. But in SCSS, they're called variables. So you can declare variables like this using the $sign. You can use it for different types of values. And you basically treat it the same way that you would define any other CSS style using the colon. So here I have the color blue, defined as a hex color, and a numeric value for a margin. And when I want to use these variables, I just insert $sign variable name to use them. There are 6 different types that you can use as values for variables. So numbers can come in many shapes and sizes, including your decimals, integers, or units like pixels or ems or whatnot. Strings can have double quotes, single quotes, or no quotes at all. Colors, you can either use the HTML color names or hex values. You can use the shortened hex values also. Booleans, your options there are true or false. And Also null is null, but you can make that into a variable if you need to. And actually, I find this one to be perhaps the most useful is lists. So that first list is something that you might have for margins or paddings where you're defining different values for the top, the right, left, and bottom, or a list of fonts for your font families. So let's add some variables here. Oh, sorry, that's the CSS file. I'll just open it from here. Okay, so instead of defining the color red, let's make a variable up here. We'll call it main color. We'll set it equal to, let's change it to blue just so that we can see that the change has happened. And here, we will set this to be the main color. So if I go back into the browser, I'm looking at the wrong index. I also have to make sure that I'm looking now at the index that's in that build folder, otherwise I won't see the changes. So, let me open this one. Here we go. Say it again. Butchering that. Okay. Yummy cookie. The yummy cookie is now in blue. We can do this also for, let's see. I often like to define fonts this way to say what my serif is going to be, what my sans is going to be, what my script is going to be, and then just set the defaults there. So let's see. Today, let's just use serif and sans. Our serif will be Bembo serif. Our sans can be Verdana. And just for good measure, we'll put these in quotes. Oh. And then, of course, we need to use those. So I'll say in my body that we will use the sans. Oh. And for headers, actually, let's do it for both of them. We'll use the serif. We might not see the change in the serif because that might be what we were already using or pretty close. But you can see that the paragraph has turned to sans serif. Let's see, let's add some margins next because everything is like right to the edges of the browser and that's pretty ugly. So we could say we want, ooh, wow, a margin of 50 pixels around everything. And here you can set the margin to margin. Yeah. And maybe we want even the block quote at the bottom to have even more of a margin. So we can apply that again, the margin, save, go over here, reload, and you can see that the margin's been applied and that the block quote is moved even further over. So that's it for variables. They're the simplest possible change that you can make to your CSS, but they mean that you don't end up writing a value over and over in your code and then having to go through and figure out which of your crazy hex color names refers to which color anymore. And it makes it super easy if you want to change things later on. But they're only good for single values, and in CSS, you might not just want to reuse single values, but entire blocks of code. So for that, there are mixins. Here's an example of a mixin for something that I do often, which is to center an element. I want to change it to display block and use auto margins on the left and right. And I don't want to write these 3 lines of code over and over and over. So I just create a mixin using @mixin. And then inside of whatever element I want to style, I @include and the name of the mixin. So let's go apply this very one to our image. First, we need to define it. I like to define all of the variables and mixins at the top so that they're easy to find and change. So @mixin centered display block, margin left, auto, and margin right, auto. @include, centered, and let's see. Oh, hi. Yeah, let's see. I'm not used to having photos snapped in the middle of a talk. That's cool. Let's see if this compiles. Oh no, I've made a mistake. I think we have a stray. Yeah, my slide's wrong. Yeah, you don't need a colon. It's just @include and the name of the mixin. So now you can see that really tantalizing image is centered. Maybe you guys can already see the power of this. I find it tremendous for dealing with vendor prefixes, because if you're doing something like a transition or a drop shadow, that involves 5 lines of code every time you want to do it if you're covering all of your browsers. And you definitely don't want to be repeating those 5 lines everywhere. So you can create a mixin that handles all of the different browsers, so that in your actual code, you only have to have one rule. But you can see that there's a bit of a problem with this. Yeah, right now I'm repeating over and over the actual value that I want to put there. So we can solve this using variables that you've already seen. I could make a variable for the radius and just include that in each of those following lines. This is better, but I think we can still do even better. And that is to pass arguments to our mixins. So here now I can say, okay, this mixin needs to accept a border radius, and that will come from the line of code that includes the mixin. Yeah?
In case of the previous slide,
yeah.
Is that variable a global or a local variable?
I believe it's local, yeah. But let's test it later. Right, so this is almost perfect, but maybe we don't want to have to pass the radius every time. Maybe we mostly want it to be 5 pixels, but there's like 2 cases where we want it to be 20 pixels. So here's showing you what it looks like to pass an argument. But you can also define a default. So here, if no radius is passed in, 5 pixels will be used. If another value is passed in, that will be used instead. Do you like this? Yeah? I like it very much. So now we can go back to not passing a parameter if we don't want to. So there are 2 main benefits of using mixins. One is simplicity. It means that throughout, it drastically reduces the size of your SCSS file because you're not repeating 5 lines of code everywhere or 3 lines of code. You're having 1 line of code every time you want to use a certain feature. So it just makes it much simpler to write code that does tricky stuff, and much easier to read through the file because you're not reading through excess junk. And then the other thing that it does is improves readability. So since you can name your arguments or name the parameters, it can help you to remember what those are for anyway. So here's one for box shadow, and I've named them based on what they do: the horizontal shadow, vertical shadow, blur, and color. And I don't know about you, but that's like for me, that's like having documentation right inside of my style sheet. I don't have to go elsewhere to look it up. I can just look in the mixin. Okay, so let's apply one of these to our image just to show that it can be done. And let's go with border radius. And we'll do radius, something that we can really see, maybe 50 pixels. So we have border, radius, oops, sorry, passing it in. And we'll just Moz and WebKit. Am I doing that right? I don't know why they're showing up red. Hopefully we've... Dash, thank you. I'm glad you guys are here. Cool. And on our image, we will want to include the border radius. So, come back. Ah, so nice. Or we can go totally crazy and be like, I don't know, we want a 200 pixel border radius instead. And if I refresh, getting closer to a circle. Any questions about mixins? No? Okay. So let's move on to the next feature, which is functions. There are built-in functions in SCSS to help you with colors, math, and more. The color functions are super cool. You can construct colors, so you can tell it, what proportion of red, green, and blue you want, or hue, saturation, lightness, including or not including alpha. You can lighten or darken a color. So this is cool. So I've defined that main color in our style sheet. Then we can say that lower level headers should either be a darker or lighter version of that main color. So I could say make H2 10% lighter or 10% darker. You can get the complement or invert of a color. I don't know if any of you guys like to play with Cooler, but I love moving the knobs all around to figure out what colors play nicely with the other colors. As a developer, I'm not trained in this. I don't really know. And these tools help ensure that I use colors that go together, that work with each other. And finally, I don't know who invented these words, but they are awesome. Opacify or transparentize. Yeah, that's cool. So clearly you can make something more or less transparent using those functions. There are even more. There's a huge list of them. I give you a link in the slides. But here's just a couple of examples of how you do it. Here, I'm lightening the main color by 20% or getting its complement. Complement means like the opposite color on the color wheel. There are also functions for basic math. So here I can decide that the padding of an element should be half of what its margin is. I could add, subtract, multiply, divide, use parentheses to make sure everything happens in the right order. And there are also functions for getting a percentage, rounding up, down, in the middle, getting the minimum or maximum of, I think it's only of 2 values. I'm not quite sure, or an absolute value. The last time I gave this talk, I was asked if there is a function for getting a random number. There isn't yet. There's a way that you can build that into your own local installation, but I hope they add that in a future version. So this is the link for all of the functions. It's a long document. Oh, well, I won't show it to you. It's a long document. Read it at your leisure. So nesting is the next feature that I want to cover, and this is how you can organize your style sheet to keep like element definitions near each other. Here's an example from before Sass. You might define the rule for your links to use a link color, and then lower down in your style sheet, you use the :hover descriptor to define what the hover state of that link looks like, and it's a totally separate rule. With nesting, we can take that hover rule and nest it inside of the rule for what a link looks like. So this is great because it means that your visited, active, all of sort of the other subsets of things that you might need to be defining at the same time can all be nested in one place in your style sheet. And when you go to browse through it, it's easier to find, oh, there's the section of my style sheet dealing with all links, or here's a section of my style sheet dealing with all images, and so forth. To actually do the nesting, you can see that inside the A has been replaced by an ampersand. So ampersand refers to what the outer element was. And you can have multiple levels of nesting. So here I'm defining what navigation should look like. And so I want navigation links to look a certain way and to act a certain way on hover. And that might be different from all of the other links in my style sheet. So let's go back to our example. Actually, stay here. So here we have 4 lines of the poem. And the first line I've marked up a little bit differently. Let's see, here we go. It's in a span, calling it the lead. Lead is like a word for a sentence that you want to emphasize at the beginning of an article. So if we want to, we could style the poem one way and style the lead differently using nesting. Actually, in the interest of time, I might skip that, try to keep us getting back on schedule. Okay, any questions about nesting? Yeah.
What if you want to, the ampersand is pointing at the A?
Yeah.
What if you, just focusing on the rest of this, because you can't point up to high level, because there's no need for it.
I don't think there's a way to point up to higher levels. I've never done it. That's a good question. That was me.
I don't think that would be logical to go up to
Yeah. Yeah. So the question was whether you can go up to other levels beyond just one using the ampersand, and we're all thinking that there's no logical reason for that. But I don't know. I can look that up after this for you.
Well, because it's cascading.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Any other questions about nesting? No? Cool. Okay, so the last major feature is inheritance, and this is useful for avoiding duplication. Here's how it works. You can define a style like .error. So you want your error message to have a certain background color so that it stands out. And then you can define other styles, like a bad error style. That means even something worse has gone wrong, so you want to make it even more noticeable. And you can have it start out with all of the styles that a normal error would have, and then add more styles on top of that. So here it's adding a border or a wider border so that you see the error message and pay attention to it. So let's do this actually in our example. We haven't at all styled this quote at the bottom yet, so let's give the block quote a background, and then we'll toy a little bit with what that background looks like. So let's see, we want to define a style. Let's have it be quote BG, and we'll say background color is, maybe we'll use, well, this will be a little blinding, I think. And we'll lighten the main color by 30%. Let's see. And I actually need to class equals G. Let's see. Okay, that's not so bad. Let's give it some padding, actually, because right now it looks terrible. And so we'll give it padding that's twice of the margin. There we go. And we can, now let's define another quote background style that extends this first one. So we'll call it fancy quote backgrounds. Extend, is it with S? No. Quote BG. And we will add 1 pixel dashed main color border. So if we look at our HTML, we won't see that because it's using the quote background style. If I switch this to fancy quote background, we should see that take effect. There you go. Can you see it? Yeah, it's really light.